Hello, and welcome to episode 133 of Retro Encounter, RPG Fans' weekly off-topic podcast. I'm Mike Sollosi, and I'm your host for today. I've hosted a bunch of these in a row, so I apologize for you guys being tired of my voice already. But you're stuck with me, and guess who else you're stuck with? Starting with Chris Gebauer.
Hello.
And also, making his first appearance on Retro Encounter, Greg Delmage.
Hello.
Now, some months ago, when I was first planning the Zelda month for Retro Encounter, I wanted one episode to be chosen by a public poll, and we already decided we wanted to do a Link's Awakening episode, which Chris, you and I recorded 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did a public poll with 4 or 5 choices on it, and I was a little surprised. A winner by more than 15 clear percentage points was the Minish Cap, the Game Boy Advance Zelda game from, I want to say 2003, 2004-ish, right? Or 04?
Yeah, right to me.
This is 03, I believe. 03, 04, yeah, something like that.
Okay, right around there. And it's the Game Boy Advance Legend of Zelda title from, I'm gonna Google it because I want to know now. Yep, it is late 2004, early 2005.
Wow, I thought it was 03. There you go.
And
never listened to me.
Right, so I guess it came out right when I had started college, because I remember playing it in college, but I wasn't sure exactly when it came out, because sometimes I get to Nintendo stuff late, because I mean I was money was definitely a factor for what games I could buy when I was in university, and
Ditto.
yeah, and Nintendo stuff never drops in price fast. Never. That stuff will stay. Those Game Boy Advance games stayed at $30 for like 5 years before going down to 25 or whatever. So I remember playing Minish Cap in my dorm room, but I was not sure exactly when it came out. But it turns out that answer is November in Japan and Europe and January in North America. So I played the Minish Cap basically. I started it right at the beginning of April and finished it over about 2 weeks. Did you guys play it for this episode, or are we running on memory fumes here? Starting with you, Greg.
I did play it for this episode. I first played Minish Cap way back when I got my original DS, back when microplays were still a thing in Ontario. I rented it along with a few other games to test out, and I really liked it, but didn't get the chance to go back and buy it due to similar reasons. I was starting university around that time as well, just didn't have the budget for it. So I jumped at the chance to go back to it. I've had it on the Wii U Virtual Console for a little while. So this was just a great excuse to play, and I pumped through it all last week and just finished it this morning.
Cool. And Chris, how about you?
I had never played Minish Cap before. I didn't have a Game Boy Advance or a DS that could play any Game Boy Advance games until I was in college, so way later. And really, it was like 2011 when I got my DS Lite and started hunting down some GBA games. And I had picked up Minish Cap actually about a year ago. Just because I found a cheap card on eBay that I was willing to pick up, kind of thing. I have probably 1,000 tabs and things watched when it comes to eBay for just that reason of like, well, that's cheap enough now. Maybe I'll pick it up. And then played through the first 2 dungeons and then got sidetracked. And when this episode came around, I saw it as a really good excuse/opportunity to finally go and finish the game.
Right on. So this is my second time playing. Again, I played it when I was in college in early 2005, I think. I'm trying to think of how I got it, because I was trying to play backlog games during that time, because I didn't have a ton of purchasing power as a 18, 19-year-old college student. But I think what happened, because my birthday is near the beginning of the year, so I think I took birthday money and bought it, is what happened. Because I have specific memories of playing it and then going on to AIM to talk to one of my friends about it that was also playing it around the same time. But this is the same friend.
Memory.
This is the same friend that I played Link's Awakening and the Oracle games with that I mentioned two episodes ago, Chris.
Yeah. Okay.
But we were on in different sides of the country at this point. So anyway, this is my second time playing the game. I played it 13 years ago and remember liking it, but forgot quite a few aspects to this game in the intervening 13 years before finishing it a day or two ago. So Now, Chris, I'm going to pick on you a little bit because you said this
Do
is
it.
your first time playing. What is your general impression of what the game is and how it compares to your other favorite Zelda games? Just general positive, negative. What's one particular
Okay,
strength of the Minish Cap?
first impression of what I really liked about the game in terms of why I hunted it down was I've always heard of it, and I think I mentioned this to you in our last recording of Zelda, that a lot of people love it, and I've heard a lot of people hate on this game. I'm not saying critically, I just mean in personal feedback about this game over the years. I've always heard very, very mixed things. So in a weird way, kind of always thought of it as like a weird stepchild of the Zelda franchise. And that, in a similar way, is why I love Majora's Mask. I was like, this game sounds like it would be right up my alley. Love the art style, first and foremost. I really have to say, I think that the sprite work and the cell shaded, very Wind Waker, or trying to ape the Wind Waker aesthetic look, it works really well. And I love how much animation is in this game. Uh, there's so
Yeah.
much just unnecessary, in a good way, animation that just fleshes out how otherwise I think simple this game would come across in a lot of ways. And simple not in terms of mechanic, simple in that it doesn't feel very long. It's actually it feels like the shortest Zelda game I've ever played. And it actually might have hour-wise been shorter than Link's Awakening. I can't really tell. But because it's only, what, 6 dungeons really overall? Maybe 6.5? I'm trying to think. I know there's a ton of side content in this game.
Yeah,
With the Kinstones
there's
and
only
everything else.
there are only 6 dungeons,
So
and
like 6 proper dungeons.
yeah
So it
they're
feels so much quicker, even though getting 2 dungeons can be a lot more tedious than in other games. But yeah, I have to say I really like the items that you collect throughout. This is pretty solid inventory, but nothing special, which is the one downside always to Zelda games that you're kind of always getting the same items, except for in this the glorious upgrade to the Rock's Feather, which
Yes.
just makes me so happy. But and you told me you'd warned me about this cape that I was going to like this cape, and you were right. This cape is
The
great.
funny thing is, I warned you by accident. I forgot the Rock's Cape was in this game. The Rock's Cape was introduced first in Oracle of Seasons,
Yes.
Yes,
which I
but
am
I haven't played
yeah,
yet.
which I have an ongoing playthrough that I have been working on for off and on for about a month. But I completely forgot that it came back in Minish Cap, so it was a bit of a surprise when it's like, wait a second, these are jumping puzzles. Am I getting
Like what the what?
is this the Rock's Feather again? And it was the Rock's Cape. And they gave it more of a they allow you to do a double jump straight up, and there's obviously more 3D in this game than there is
Yes.
in Oracle of Seasons. So I
Or
have,
ages.
yeah, or ages. So it's a very I was a little surprised by that. I completely forgot about the Gust Jar and the Cane of Pachi,
Hmm.
and a lot of this was just completely not totally new to me because parts of it did come back, but I think when I played this 13 years ago, I had a lot of other stuff going on, and this game sort of went in my brain and then straight back out. So I don't want to say it was like a fresh playthrough this time
No, but
around.
it definitely has curveballs to the formula that at this point I feel like if anyone who's at least played a couple Zeldas would be able to say like, okay, it does something different, and that actually goes a long way with a franchise like this.
Right. Okay. And Greg, what was your impression from playing through? I guess the second half of this game for the first time. But
Uh,
what's your all feeling following completing the game?
Great. I have played through both Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons over the past couple of years. I think it was last year, or the year before. I beat them both. Did all the crossover
Mhm.
material because they were on special on the 3DS Virtual Shop.
Both of you took advantage of that sale.
Yeah, well,
Sure
I
did.
mean, it's an old favorite of mine.
Sure
I've
did.
played both of them at least 2 or 3 times each, and but I'm revisiting them following taking advantage of that
Oh,
sale.
okay. Yeah, and I enjoyed them. Like for being they do have a different flavor than what Nintendo strictly blings on its own with the Capcom vibe. There's
Yeah,
you can definitely see where they're pulling in various Nintendo inspirations
like a
for the
Lakitu,
sake of pardon.
like the random
Yeah.
Lakitu's that just
Yes.
are there at the end game.
Yeah, or like let's throw in some bombs. Like they just throw in a
Yeah.
bunch of random nods to the series, also to other Nintendo franchises, and like
Totally.
especially with the jumping mechanics and such too, to give it a little bit of that Mario vibe, especially in those two. So yeah, seeing that brought back in a 3D kind of realm was neat. Seeing how they brought back a lot of the Wind Waker flavor from art, some of the stuff from Link to the Past. They're just kind of mashing up a lot of stuff into one big nostalgia
Yeah.
package and making it gorgeous, like you said, with all the beautiful sprite work and the
Oh
fleshed
yeah,
out details, the
Capcom
dangly bits.
Capcom had the best sprites in the late '90s and early 2000s. I mean, we did a few episodes on Breath of Fire 4 a few months ago, and Alana and I were marveling at those beautiful Capcom sprites. And this is from a mic. This was not Capcom Team One. This was some Capcom staff and mostly Flagship staff, which was a second-party developer that worked for Capcom. But I'll get into that in a little bit. But what
No worries.
else jumped up?
Can I
Jumped out
add
at you from
one
the
thing
game?
to that quickly?
Mm.
Sorry, Greg, that you
Go.
just made me think about because you're
Yeah,
so
yeah.
right. Is that what is so charming to me about this game is that it seems to be this wonderful cornucopia of many Zelda games and clearly pulling from all of them. Like you had mentioned, as I had before, the art style is very Wind Waker to me, but direct characters and sound effects or sound cues are pulls from Ocarina of Time.
Um,
And a few from Wind
Oh, I'm
Waker as
guessing.
well, I think
Yeah,
too.
no, yes, and from Wind Waker as well. Now, granted, I'm sure that the other Game Boy games I missed potentially had those pulls as well to them.
they didn't have
They
the
didn't really
sound.
have
They didn't have the sound effects. The
yeah.
Game Boy Advance version of A Link to the Past did. They added
Really?
some sound effects from. I think they're probably from Young Link's voice work
Sure.
in Ocarina of Time, but they did add
So they don't
some.
do like Epona song randomly when every
No,
time you're
no,
talking to.
no, not
Yeah,
like that.
okay.
Just the mostly just Link doing shout noises and stuff, and
Yeah.
it's only in the
Yeah,
Game
okay.
Boy Advance version of A Link to the
Huh.
Past.
I don't know how that does.
But this
So,
one, yeah, we got those
but
characters from Lon Lon as well from Ocarina.
Yeah.
mhm.
And the music of being in a house or in a store, like
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
just like
old
straight
staples.
ocarina and all this other stuff from
yeah.
pulling from different games that are yes, this theme from here, this theme from here. I just love that kind of
I
But with
think
its own spin too.
yeah, of course,
You're going
yeah.
to say, Mike?
Yeah, I think a lot of that started with the Oracle duo of games because going back to the developers of this, it was developed by Capcom and Flagship with supervision from various Nintendo staff. And
Yeah.
Flagship was a Capcom studio, and when it ended up going out of business in the mid 2000s, all of the employees folded back either into Nintendo or Capcom, and they mostly
Huh.
did like ports and sequels to Capcom games, but they did do 3 Legend of Zelda games, the Oracle of Ages, Oracle of Seasons, and Minish Cap. And I think there's sort of 3 interesting people attached to Flagship that we should bring up in conjunction with this game. The studio founder Yoshiki Okamoto did not work on Minish Cap, but after Flagship folded, he formed his own company to make mobile games, and one of them was extremely successful, called Monster Strike, which made over $1 billion in 2016. It was one of the most popular.
Cheapers.
It was one of the most popular mobile games in Japan for its window of success there.
Wow.
Second of all, a guy you might have heard of, Keiji Inafune, a longtime Capcom producer and creator
Yeah.
of one of the co-creators of Mega Man, had been with the company for ages. He left under, not the happiest circumstances several years
What?
ago. Um,
He
and
totally didn't throw a middle finger to everyone when he left that
Yeah,
company.
yeah, a little bit. He did not leave on great terms, but he was a
Yeah.
producer on the Minish Cap. I don't know exactly how much influence he had with it, but he's right there in the credits. But maybe the most important and most interesting chap working on the Minish Cap is Hidemaru Fujibayashi. He was a longtime Capcom guy who worked with Flagship on games like Resident Evil 2. Then he was the lead director and writer for Oracle of Ages, Oracle of Seasons, and Minish Cap. So I think that a lot of the
Hot
design
take.
ideas that those games have in common are through him, or at least with
Yeah, there's definitely a big through line through all three of them. I definitely found a
yeah.
lot of similarities playing through this, going like, oh yeah, this just totally feels like this in Oracle and this, and because
Okay.
wasn't there a Gust Jar in one of them as well? I
Alright.
feel like that was
Oh, I don't
a
think so. I think
I
Gust
can't remember now.
Jars. I think that Gust Jar is new to this one. The
Is
Rock's
it
Cape
just okay?
was in
Give me just
Oracle of.
yeah, or was the
Uh,
feather and then it upgraded if you did the
yeah.
crossover
Yes.
between the two or something?
No. No, in Oracle of
How did that all play out?
in Oracle of Seasons, you get the Rock's Feather in an early dungeon, and it upgrades to the Rock's Cape in Dungeon 7.
Okay, that's what I'm
In
thinking of.
Oracle of Ages, it's only the Rock's Feather and does not upgrade in that game. But in
Oh,
the
okay, that's
yeah,
what I'm thinking of.
and in Minish Cap, you just get the Rock's Cape. Does not do a
Yeah,
Rock's Feather thing. But a lot of
Banner
items
thing.
upgrade when you transfer from one game to the next, including the sword, and
yeah,
yeah, a bunch of stuff. I'd have to check a list, but I don't remember
me too.
if
But
there's a Gust Jar in another game. I thought this was the first time we have one.
it might be, and I just might be remembering back to when I played that one way
Is it?
back when. I just thought it felt familiar. That's all I know, but it's probably because I did play a little bit into the first dungeon when I rented it back in the day. But at any rate, yeah. So it has a lot going for it, and a lot of similarities where you can see that they laid the groundwork for how they wanted to do their take on the Legend of Zelda series. And as Chris said, that it kind of feels like Legend of Zelda light in a lot of ways because it is very quick, condensed, zip through. But there is a lot of side stuff to go chasing around if you want to do that with the Kinstones, with
Yeah.
Oh, and we'll
um,
talk about Kinstones,
all that sort of
but
stuff.
back to
Long dead.
Fujibayashi-san.
Yes.
He was the director for those three flagship games, and then he joined. He moved over to Nintendo instead of staying with Capcom after the studio folded. So he was one of the writers for Phantom Hourglass for the DS, and then he was the lead.
Oh.
Then he was the lead director and writer for Skyward Sword and Breath of the Wild. So,
Jesus.
Breath of the Wild, the one of the biggest, most popular Zelda games ever, and it was recognized very highly in our favorite Zelda episode from 3 weeks ago. Was directed by the guy who made those three weird Capcom games. So,
I like it.
so this guy who didn't necessarily get his start with those Zelda games. He was with Capcom for several years before then. But there's a direct through line from those Oracle games and the game we're talking about today, all the way to Breath of the Wild, and he's one of the current architects of what Zelda is, if not the most important one other than Miyamoto.
Well, he
So,
proved his pedigree for sure.
so yeah, but
Right.
this is the early Zelda work of the Breath of the Wild director, and I'm not going to try and make a comparison from Minish Cap to Breath of the Wild because I think they're in a way opposite ends of the Zelda spectrum because Breath of the Wild really sells its vastness and it's about exploring a huge space and all the density and the all of the activity within that space. While Minish Cap is, has mini right in the title. It's one of the smallest Zelda maps in the series, and
Yeah, it shocked me.
it's very dense. It has 44 heart pieces in a very small space, which is something like tied for third for the most heart pieces in a Zelda game. There's a lot of stuff to collect.
I guess we could argue different levels of minimalism. One in its vastness, one in its just tiny friggin' map.
and
then
also
filled with crap.
And then
And also
the tiny
there's
worlds
its
that you can explore.
there's its its signature gimmick of Link shrinking down to mini size and exploring some spaces in a different way.
Which
So
is very charming.
oh yeah, it is charming. Uh, I sort of like the sound effects that all of the Minish people make. These very high, these sort of high pitched like
Yeah.
animal like gnome characters.
Whatever. Yeah.
A more
Very cute.
palatable Navi. Let's say that.
Yeah, I would call Eslo much more entertaining than Navi.
That's why I said much more palatable. But it's
Yeah,
got that
Yes.
but we had
high pitched kind of thing going.
But we had not name dropped Eslo yet. The guy who squeaks kind of like a goose, but he's the
Yeah.
he's a Link's talking hat. Early in the game, a disaster strikes. A mysterious guy named Vati turns the Princess Zelda into stone and makes his intentions to, control the ultimate power of the world evident. And Link, vows to stop him, goes to the woods, and sees a magical
Because he
talking hat
has
on the
to.
ground.
Yeah, doesn't have a
Because everyone
choice.
says
Only
he's a
kid
cat.
can
He's a
see.
kid.
Yeah.
Can see the Minish.
Right, and then the talking hat is Eslo, who was a former Minish wizard, and Vati was his former apprentice, and now they team up to stop Vati in this condensed version of Hyrule. So that leads you to the first shrine. I'm sorry, I've been playing too much Breath of the Wild recently. The first dungeon of the game, which is called the Deepwood Shrine. And what are your?
Such relaxing music there.
It did have nice music. Chris, what was your first impression of the Deepwood Shrine?
Deepwood Shrine wasn't very. Unfortunately, especially having just kind of like Greg, I beat the game this morning on the subway. So I'm kind of more obsessed with the Dark Hyrule Castle. I don't really have much of a memory of that first dungeon. I would say it took me a little while to recognize when I would need to shrink down for something and actually realize, like, okay, that's how they want me to focus on the puzzle here. But I felt like the first dungeon was really straightforward. There was nothing really difficult. Kind of really don't remember anything much about it except for the boss, which I found really charming. That it was just because you're a tiny person. It's
Yeah.
a choo choo or whatever those things are called. What are those
No,
things
no,
called?
it's a choo choo. Yeah,
I think
Choo-choo,
I
yeah.
guess this time it would have been a green choo choo.
yeah, green choo choo just dripping through the ceiling and reforming itself or falling through. And yeah, I thought that again that as Greg you mentioned the whole playing with size and the charm that really allows to come through with oh this thing that normally takes you 2 seconds to kill, well now we can make it actually a big baddie and
Yeah,
perspective, new
and
circumstances,
just
go have fun.
the way they use like the graphical prowess of their sprite work and such, like the with the 3D environments of like I'm in this rolling barrel and
Yeah,
it
the,
looks
the the
Yeah,
3D the 3D of
great.
that barrel impressed me the first
that
when
is
I
cool.
revisited that.
Hmm.
And
And again, it goes back to its usual gimmicks of like find X treasure to make X thing easier to explore and use
Oh
it
yeah.
to fight the boss. So we're in that kind of old scheme, but it's nice
oh
to have
yeah,
that familiarity.
yeah, I mean, talking about Zelda formula, we did an episode all about that last week. But this is the most traditional of the Zelda formula. Find the signature treasure, solve puzzles with the signature treasure, find the boss key, and then defeat the boss. And the treasure is involved in fighting the boss.
Use Gust
Hmm.
Jars on toadstools. I gotta say, I liked that mechanic the first time.
No,
I
I
mean,
think the Gust Jar is is a
never
neat
gets
thing.
boring, but
Um,
especially the first time, I was like, okay, this is something different, which I like. I like
It's a
that
little
it's.
tedious as a motorboat, but otherwise,
Oh
yeah.
yeah, totally. When you're doing the lily pad stuff,
oh
it's a
yeah.
really fun.
And I didn't even think about using the Gust Jar. The Gust Jar comes back of all places in the final boss of the game, so
Yeah,
they do a pretty good job
Yeah,
of making these items
yeah, that
useful
took me a
throughout the
while.
entire game. But
I was gonna say that.
yeah,
Yeah,
both the Cane of Pachi and the Gust Jar were. It's like man, how am I supposed to access this boss? Oh, the freaking Cane of Pachi? Are you kidding? But
right.
yeah, I thought that this dungeon was very charming, very cute. It wasn't overly challenging or too pathetically easy like the Gnarled Root dungeon in Oracle of Seasons. But
It looked pretty. Like that's really the most I could say about it. I liked the lighting, and I
and
thought it was
it
designed well, but
it
nothing really memorable to me,
and
unfortunately.
I liked that it did the Yoshi's Island thing of turning a regular enemy giant for a boss fight.
Yeah, it
and
is.
Yeah,
It just
and
is.
and honestly, I was a little disappointed that they only did that in two dungeons in the Deepwood Shrine and the Temple of Droplets later.
Yeah,
yeah. And then they kind of
I
brought him back as a mini
and it's the
boss at
same
one
damn
point
thing.
at the Lightning Chew, but
Yeah.
yeah, nothing. They could have done some more
yeah
for sure.
I would have rather this was like 4 out of 6 bosses instead of two. But it's still it's a cool gimmick and it was pretty impressive the very first time you see it. Although I think
Hmm.
it's interesting that I don't know how the builders of this dungeon planned for a Choo Choo to walk in from the outside and defend the essence, because otherwise it's just an empty room. I was like, what if there isn't what if there isn't a giant monster around to fall in? But
Yeah,
the
or was it just supposed to be a happenstance? Like the essence was just supposed to be there, and you're just supposed to go through the trials and tribulations. But when you
I don't know,
start
man.
looking too hard into the logic of dungeon design in
It's
any
a
of those
video
games,
game ass
Yeah,
video game. Let it be as
yeah.
such.
It's
exactly.
like it's a weird hole to travel down if you're thinking about the architecture of dungeons in video games. There's
Yes.
way too many plot holes that
Oh my
go
god.
unfilled.
That
But
reminds me of
I
like
thought it was
back in the
I thought it was
day with
mhm.
printed maps for
Oh yeah.
like early first person shooters, and when you would see the layouts of a Wolfenstein 3D or a Doom, you'd be like, no one would build that structure. This makes
Hmm.
no sense. What is this floor plan?
And
Doesn't
if
matter,
you
it's a
look
lot
at
of fun. Go through it.
if you look at it, I don't know if they were fan made or Nintendo made, but some of the maps for the NES Metroid and the Game Boy Metroid games,
Mhm.
they uh, holes go into each other. It does not
Oh
make
yeah, it doesn't make
sense
sense.
in
I
a
love
2D
it.
space. So
I love it.
you have to go into a Z axis just for those maps to be possible. But they got better with it from Super Metroid onwards.
Which is great. And it's funny. Just I was just remembering too, going back into my thoughts on first approaching this game. Um, my actual first exposure to Minish Cap, aside from when I played it years ago, but actually going through the whole story, I got the Akira Hamakawa um, mangas, the whole
Oh
like
yeah,
Legend of
the
Zelda
one, yeah, oh
collection.
yeah, the ones that got published in Nintendo Power in part, and then were collected later.
Yeah, so I got and I've read the Minish Cap one, so it's kind of funny to like just kind of see how well they interpreted the story and the artwork and such, and all the
Huh.
characters into from the game and into this graphic manga. So yeah, it's just kind of funny going like, oh, this is kind of familiar to me, this whole story, and these characters are kind of familiar to me, but not because
Yeah,
I've never
slightly
played
different.
this.
Yeah.
But one thing, as you were saying about how this dungeon was accessible, and it was like, yeah, it was a nice little light kind of introduction into the mechanics and to what you expect from it. But I find what all three of the Capcom games did for me is they do a real good job of making you feel like a genius.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
like,
Zelda puzzles are more about making the
Yes.
player feel smart than truly challenging the player. Except for Eagle Tower 20 years ago, which truly challenged the player.
Oh yeah,
Absolutely,
because just especially in Black
beyond a
and White.
shadow of a doubt, no arguments.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Interesting that you said that though, Greg, because for me, while the dungeons I did get that general, endorphin release of like I am cool, I did that in them. That I found personally a lot more of those really aha yay me moments in the in between dungeons, the getting to the next dungeon, like doing the hunt down the three books quest,
yeah, how
or
about
I was not a fan of the Hunt Down the Three Books
oh,
quest.
and that's the thing. A lot
that?
of them were kind of like what I hinted at the beginning. I was kind of impressed at, and sometimes annoyed, like with that one, at how long the in between dungeon quests were.
Me too. It
In
was
my
almost
head, I
like
kept thinking it would be
another
quick.
dungeon.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's like, oh, that's why it's only six. It's because there's actually a lot more padding on the in between. And I think it's
That
because they don't expect you to, like you and I did, Greg, to just, and I think you as well, Mike, just blast through it in under a week. And they're like, no, you're going to
yeah,
take your time and talk to people and use Kinstones and figure things out and explore every little
yeah,
hole you missed.
And I don't know,
exactly. Because oh, sorry, go, Mike.
maybe this speaks to my preferences, but I would have preferred if this was more like the Oracle games and had 8 dungeons and just less fewer things to do between dungeons. Because I mean, I think that Legend of Zelda games, the dungeons are the most fun part for most of them. And sometimes I'll even like not necessarily define a Zelda game by its dungeons, but a lot of the time my key favorite memory of a Zelda game will be my favorite dungeon. So the
Yeah.
fact that these dungeons are pretty good, and we only got 6 of them, and if you just play the game and don't do a lot of exploring, which I mean I found fewer than half of the heart pieces. I did a lot of Kinstone Fusion, but not most of it. Like I think I would have preferred if this game was 8 dungeons and had fewer things like traversing the entire wilds just to find the Wind Shrine, and or the Wind Ruins, and the entire locating the missing library books quest, which I found that pretty annoying at
Yeah, I
times.
really thought it was just going to be the one book. And then when there
No,
was like,
it's
okay,
three
the next
books.
book is, I was like, what the hell? And then when I realized where the first book was positioned, I was like, oh, there's going to be three.
Yeah, it was interesting how much there was in between. It kind of caught me off guard, but it's still, I don't know, I found the world a joy to explore. And as all of these games do, it's always very satisfying to see how well they engage the player with the new toys you unlock in each dungeon to be like, oh,
Yes.
I got this rod. I remember that hole I could go to. I'm going to go shoot the rod in that
Yeah,
hole. And, oh, I can get up to this ledge now. So cool. And
Yeah.
oh, there's this guy I can. Yeah, and then
they
once you get the Pegasus boots, you get all access to all these
Yeah.
stumps. It's really neat.
Yeah, they do a good job of gating away content and hiding details that are unlockable with items that you find in dungeons and between dungeons. Like you get the bow between dungeons in this game, which feels a little weird. I'm used to that being, I don't know, a bit of a more important moment than
Yeah.
getting in
Hmm.
items in a Zelda game. But uh, they do a good job of making all of your items useful, and having the last major one you unlock be the Rock's Cape, and all of the things that were separated by islands or separated by ledges,
Yeah.
no longer major factors anymore, is awesome. And and again, it makes exploring and re-exploring the different areas of the game rewarding. I but again, it's this world feels dense and cool, but I like dungeons more than re-exploring
I
world
agree.
maps.
It's why I left more than half of that content untouched. Because while it's cool, and now that, when we're done recording, I won't have that, sort of Damocles kind of thing of just like I gotta finish this. But I'm definitely gonna go back because I want to see a little bit more of it because I'm curious about
Yeah,
how much
I
more
think
there
that
is.
I think the
I
maximum
agree.
is 20 hearts if you in the game with again 44 pieces of
Yeah,
heart. 44 pieces of heart, 3 that you start with and then
I was
6 that you get
shocked
in
by that.
dungeons. But I
Yeah,
only finished with 11. So I don't know. I
So
have a
how
lot
many
of
is there across the top again? Is it eight
it's
across the top?
I think it's 10 on
I think it's
across the
10.
top.
Oh,
Yeah,
10. So I think I finished with 14
yeah, that's about what I
myself.
have right now.
Yeah, so
Yeah, okay.
I was under healthed maybe, but that's because I didn't do a ton of exploring or a ton of kinstone fusing.
It's
After
just fun.
I kept forgetting to press L to fuse with people. Like I would re-remind myself when like when you got a yellow kinstone piece to that was required by the story, which only happens a couple times.
Hmm.
Yeah. Oh, one thing that just to yeah, going back to explore, I want to know what the heck those Gorons are up to. I got two of them. I need two more. I'm
Yeah,
like,
I
what's
did
behind
too
that
as
wall?
well.
I need to
I gotta
know.
figure this out.
Yeah, exactly.
I
I
actually
actually did
know what
find
it
that
is
because
because I
no
cheated because I
no,
figured out what it is. But
well, I know what it is too because I was when I was preparing for the final dungeon, I'm like, crap, I only have one bottle. I need to see where I can get the other three just so
Ah,
I can have some
I got
fairies to
three.
deal with. Yeah, the fourth one is at the end of that Goron tunnel.
but isn't that
And
also how you get the
Spoilers.
mirror shield thing? Isn't that also the mirror shield?
I
I
don't
was
know.
gonna say, is there a shield upgrade? There must be
There
because
is.
yeah,
I
Yeah.
did
that
not get
one
close
lousy
to,
shield.
Because I
I did
saw
not get close to a
something.
mirror shield.
Yeah,
Absolutely not.
I think
Did you
it
get
has
your
to do with the
magic
Goron thing.
boomerang?
I did not get a magic boomerang.
Wait,
Is
what's the
there
magic
three great
boomerang?
fairies by the way? I've only found two
I definitely found
because
one.
usually there's
I'm not sure
three.
if there's more. I don't
Because I
remember.
found the one that you
Hmm.
give you throw the bomb in or throw the bomb in or whatever. I think it was a bomb, and they're like, oh, did you throw in a silver bomb or a golden bomb or just a regular one? The classic Fable. And then there was the other one where you threw in as all your rupees,
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
and
what
then they
Goron
asked,
that's the one I found. That was the one in the woods.
yeah, that's
The
the
other one,
magic boomerang one. No, I think, or was it the
the one in the
wallet
woods
one?
is
No,
the
that was the
wallet.
wallet. That was the wallet one.
Okay, the other one was the magic boomerang one. Then I
And
guess.
was that
Yeah.
in the mountain?
I
Because I
forget where I found that
found
one.
a
That sounds
great
about right.
fairy fountain in the mountain, but I haven't returned to it from when I opened it at the
Yeah, I
beginning.
think it was the mountain. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you followed. It's got like you go down a side little cliff route that there's just like the two
Oh,
doors or
cool. Yeah, I'm
something
gonna
like
go
that. Yeah.
check that out now.
Yeah,
Yeah, that
but
upgrades that.
but I remember looking when I wanted bottles just so I could have more health for the final
Right.
dungeon, and the last one is in that Goron subquest near the
Interesting.
Lon Lon Ranch, and the problem is finding that one. You have to find you have to fuse kinstones that are on inscriptions underground in
Yeah.
tunnels. So I think I
Yeah,
only found two or three, and there's at least four or five.
I know, I remember bumping into a few of those when I didn't have the kinstones, and then my problem now is just like, which
Where
ones
were
did I
they?
unlock and which
Yeah.
ones didn't? What do I
Oh
have to go
boy.
back to? I might have to,
Yeah.
just for again, I'm an adult, I don't have the time. I may have to go back to a
Walk
guide on that
through.
one. I usually try and pride myself on not doing that for
Mhm.
certain games and for certain stuff, but it's like I can't waste my time running in and out of and digging is time consuming.
Hey, hey. I'm not gonna pretend that I got that I've 100%ed a Dark Souls on my own. You beat it once on your own, and then when you do New
That's what
Game
yeah,
Plus, you fill in the blanks.
Yeah,
and I agree with
I
that.
don't have
That's what I do
I don't
too.
have any shame in using guides for retro encounter games, especially ones that I've already played.
If you want
But
to blast through, yeah.
Yeah.
I was able to go through this one without really being challenged. Some of the dungeon stuff and boss fights were a little tricky, but it's pretty well communicated how to defeat each of them. The ones that I liked the best were probably the ones in the Wind Ruins and Wind Palace, just because I like the mechanic of shrinking down and then entering the robot or whatever. And
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
that
was
was a very
fun.
satisfying dungeon.
yeah, the Wind Ruins was fun. I like the I like the final boss of that one a lot. And the Wind Palace was a really linear dungeon, but had a lot of weird, fun jumping puzzles in it.
Yeah, the
And
last
And I
sorry, the last two
appreciate that
dungeons.
Eslo called that one out too. Just like, how long does this dungeon go on? I'm like,
yeah,
I know, right?
it's lengthy, but only it's basically single path. Like I
It
was a little
is.
surprised at how linear that was. I'm used to dungeons being a little bit more, door A, B, or C, and you got to go back to door B after getting the item through door C. But A has the key that you need at the end of C.
Yeah,
Um,
like the underground one, which was really cool. The one on the marsh or whatever.
Mhm.
That was the
yes.
yeah the wind
Yeah,
yeah
that,
the
that was
wind
the Wind
one.
Ruins
No,
was
the palace, the
the wind
Ruins.
the wind there's the Wind Ruins and then the Palace of Winds, but
Yeah, the
Yes.
wind ruins was the really
yeah
cool for that.
yeah it was more non-linear than most of the other ones, and the Wind Palace felt a little too linear for me. Maybe just because I don't know, I like '90s Zelda dungeons. Uh,
I just think by the time you get to that palace, the game really is trying to be like, we have all this other side stuff and you can get back to it. But by that point, and I felt the same way with Dark Hyrule Castle, it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah,
There's not that much creativity in the sense of like, well, if I do I have to go left, right, or forward? It's pretty much no. This is the path you take. And outside of like I guess which order you could have killed the Dark Nut guys, but maybe that is also
Yeah.
pretty
Yeah. Dark
straightforward.
Hyrule Castle is a bit of I mean, and to which point you said, starting from the Palace of Winds and then going into Dark Hyrule Castle, it does feel like that they're hurtling towards a finish a little bit.
Yeah, they really
Yeah.
like
And
do it.
and they even use story stakes to influence you a little bit by like having a bunch of people turn to stone and the knowledge that Vati's at the end of the castle about to gain the ultimate power by sacrificing Zelda. That's all pretty dark and I think motivates the player pretty well. But you can leave.
But you
Dark
can walk
Hyrule Castle.
outside and be like, it's pretty.
Yeah,
I
I
wanna
know.
explore.
I did that to get an extra 2 bottles and I think like one more piece of heart. So just because I had
Those-
3 out of 4, I think.
Those bottles being what, dog food and the one from your
From your grandfather. Yep, those are the 2.
And it makes life easier to, as far as I understand it, for like the Cocoa Quest when you're trying to chase down Cocos, because aren't a lot of people like indoors and out of the way and stuff?
Oh yeah, but isn't that only a piece of heart you get from the Cocoa Lady?
I think so. That's the one thing I did use the a guide for because I couldn't figure out how to get the last like 3 and it just turns out that I wasn't stepping quite close enough to the edge of the water. I just didn't realize. I tried throwing them across and I was like, it's not working. I just keep drowning chickens. I don't get it. But no, once I just watched someone do it and I was like, oh, so it's possible. I just was a hair too far back.
Yeah, it's like why can't I make this jump into Mega Man game? I should totally have a sense of space for this. Like, oh no, in this Mega Man game, Mega Man can be almost all the way off the cliff and still stand on it as long as it has tiptoe is on the
As long as there's a
ledge.
pixel on a pixel.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You didn't have a sense of pixel space.
Yeah. But back to like dungeon exploration and using items. This one I found too. It shocked me how reliant bombs were as a way to explore the dungeons as a mainline thing. Because if I recall in Link to the Past, that was a thing too, where there were certain dungeons where there were hidden walls and such if you could bomb and go into it. But it was rare that it was a necessary part of the quest. It was usually like to find just a chest full of rupees or something. Stuff. But this one, I found they used it a lot more often as this is a main room that you need to go to progress further into this dungeon.
Yeah, and I remember,
and I liked it.
One that took me a while to figure, not a while, but it took me a little bit longer, was in Dark Hyrule Castle, where there is a spot where you have to, and it's clear, it's telegraphed, you bomb this wall to go outside of the castle. Then on the outside, it doesn't show you where the bomb wall is to go in. If you're inside, you can see it telegraphed, and then you have to kind of figure it out spatially. But I like that, because that was more hearkening to the original 2 games of like, okay, a lot more of this is hidden instead of clearly telegraphed.
Yeah,
it definitely begged a little trial and error.
I remember, we might have mentioned this 2 weeks ago, Chris, but I remember there's a really annoying bomb wall that you have to find in Turtle Rock in Link's Awakening.
Oh yeah,
it's right near the end of the game. All there is a freaking switch in a room, and the only way that you know to go there is by checking your map. And there's one dark room, and you got to just test all the 4 rooms surrounding that one to find out where the bomb wall is. It's but they do make a good job of having. We alluded to this before. They do a good job of having all of your items be useful through to the final dungeon and using them in creative ways. Again, I was dumbfounded that I had to use the Gust Jar and the Cane of Pachi against the final boss of the game, but they A lot of these, I mostly found them as just sort of fun subversions or new versions of old old Legend of Zelda items. Like this is the most powerful lantern in Zelda history, I think, because
it's amazing.
Yeah, like the lantern in A Link to the Past kind of sucks and is barely
limited by magic, right?
Yeah, it is limited by magic and only just lights the way in front of you. This one is a lantern you can switch on and off. You can set mummies on fire way more easily than in A Link to the Past. Is not governed by magic and has a 360 cone of light vision instead of a 90-degree cone of vision. This lantern rules.
It also really likes to announce itself if you have it on when you go into a room. Just every room is always just like explodes to life every single time you enter a chamber if you've got it lit.
Fire explosion! Fire explosion!
But yeah, no, it was really neat. But that being said, it was still very frustrating getting around that stupid graveyard. Especially when you had to like go back to revisit it when you unlocked some of the stuff like the joy butterflies and stuff from finding homes for the goddesses,
Oh yeah, I
and
remember.
and
I
it
remember
shows you.
the Kinstone goddess thing to unlock butterflies. I know that there was something at the end of that quest line, but I didn't see it. I
Can you
gave. I
explain?
think
I
I
missed this entirely. Are those the three women in the inn?
yeah.
Of the
Yeah, and
Yeah,
they're from Oracle of Ages and Seasons.
yeah, they're the three oracles from the Oracle duo of games, and
What? Really?
you speak to like a real estate developer in town who will build three houses, and you can tell the three oracles about the houses, and then they'll move into them, and once they move into the houses, you can they'll give you charms to put in a bottle if you want. And if you fuse Kinstones with them when they're in their new houses, they'll unlock butterflies on the world map. And I do not know
Which give
what
you
to do with.
little bonuses.
Oh, they do.
One of them lets you.
I unlocked one butterfly, but I wasn't sure what they did, and I was ready to go near the end of the game, so I gave up on
Yeah,
that.
one of them gave me you could shoot your bow faster, and the other one I forget what it did now. But yeah, they all basically have mild improvements to what you can do, so it's useful in that way. And I like how
Cool.
the real estate developer was Malin's uncle. Uh,
Oh, you don't mean like Terran from Link's Awakening,
it was
or
Talon.
No, no,
It
no.
was Talon
Talon
Malin.
guy is the dude from Lon Lon,
okay,
and
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Malin is the brother. Is that the
yeah.
brother?
It's Talon
Talon's brother.
the brother who also in Majora's Mask is the jerk. I
Okay,
forget which
it's
forget which
Oh my
one. The one
god.
that looks like Mario. Is that Malin?
The the one who looks like Mario in my mind is always the one that what's his name that Mike just mentioned from
yeah,
Link's Awakening
yeah.
is always Terran
Yeah,
in
that's
my head.
Terran from Link's Awakening. It's
And
Marin
now I'm
and
getting
Terran
confused.
in Link's Awakening, and then I know in
It is Talon and Malin, but
yeah,
now I'm
I think
no,
it is
it's
an Ocarina of
from
Time.
Ocarina of Time onwards. It's I think Malin and Talon, and they are not
Yeah,
the same people from Link's Awakening.
they're not, no.
that
But
for
it's just kind
sure.
of funny
Yeah,
that
it's confusing.
again, that's where one of those nods was brought back to Ocarina of Time, and
I
yeah,
like
just
that.
he comes in as the real estate developer. He's all slightly shady looking.
He's slightly
But yeah,
shady, and at first I was concerned that he was going to build his house over the home of a Minish, but then but because there's like a Minish in a house that says I
Yeah.
like this house, but I'm worried I'm considering moving out, and then you build a house directly over the Minish guy's house, and I was concerned a little bit for this for this pixel character, but when I
You
went
go
into
and he's like,
the newly built house, the Minish that was there is in a mouse hole, and it's like, oh, I love my new place. It's like, oh, okay, this is a happy ending.
yeah,
upgrade.
no, they were definitely into it, which is
Yeah,
great.
but I was briefly
Um,
concerned that a Minish was about to be extirpated from his home.
yeah, me too. I had that very same thing. You're like, no. But that being said, sorry, before we got off on the whole
Yeah, bro.
tangent on the butterflies, the graveyard, it was such a tease when you saw them when you unlocked chests and such,
Hmm.
and it came down and like there wasn't any of the superficial darkness that you need the lantern to go through. So I was like, oh, is the darkness lifted? Great, I'm gonna enjoy going back there to get that thing. And no, you went back, and I was like, oh, now I need my lantern, and there's crows flying at me, and it was very misleading to return to after this tease
I
that the video gave.
I always get extra pleasure out of slashing crows in Zelda games because they have the most condescending expressions on their faces. It's like, yeah,
See, and that would
I'm
have been
looking down at
cool.
you. Now I'm gonna peck you. Ha! Oh, you killed
Yeah,
me.
and that would have been neat to have, like when you were saying, having them being mini and fighting giant things, like fighting a crow when we're miniature would have been really neat and
Right?
a fun challenge.
That would have been a perfect boss for some miniature dollhouse floating in the sky for the sixth dungeon. But instead, we had to fight some, I don't know, dancing manta rays flying over each other in choreographed patterns. That boss fight was interesting,
It was tricky.
it is maybe the craziest use yet of the before the final boss of using the copy links to attack enemies in very specific geometric patterns.
Which can we talk about how frustrating that mechanic can be sometimes because it
Yeah,
takes so long to charge the sword.
and also, if you like when you let's say when you're fighting the final boss and have three copy links next to Link in a line, and if one of them gets hit by a lightning ball or a fireball,
Oh,
then you
Start
then
again.
you take damage and you have to start again. So
yeah,
like
Frustrating.
I would have liked if they if that mechanic was faster or smoother, but it did make for some creative puzzles at least. But all right, before we close up, I do want to address a couple things about the dungeons and items. Do we have favorites? Starting with you, Chris. Favorite dungeon and favorite item.
Favorite item in this game would be, I mean, I want to say Rock's Cape just because I'm obsessed with jumping into 2D Zelda always. Uh, Going back to the Rock's Feather, uh, blowing my mind as a kid. But it's honestly probably the Gust Jar.
Hmm.
Cane Apache was
really.
cool and useful, but outside of the select puzzles, it just never really, I just never used it unless I had to. Whereas the Gust Jar, I really appreciated how that item interacts with so much of the world. Specifically with, different monsters, whether it be the flower ones and how you could just suck them in, or the guys with the metal mask things, suck those off and then them. I get a kick out of, even though it's not the quickest way to dispatch of them. Again, from the beginning, how I love the animation side of everything. I just really, 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 really dug that Gust Jar.
It
But
was a little bit like playing a Ratchet and Clank game because almost all of those have a black hole gun or a vacuum gun that you can use to suck up
yeah,
enemies and shoot them at others.
totally.
And so,
Uh,
do you have a favorite dungeon?
and the dungeon, I would say, was. It's weird. Again, played through two today. So the easy one to think of is the Wind Palace, but it was too linear. I'm with you on that. That was kind of frustrating. I just liked the design again of it and the color palette. It just was such a nice change of pace for me.
I did not love the Kinstone quest to get up there. I've
No, that was annoying as hell. That the
beca-
five
Oh,
Kinstones.
that
yeah,
yeah,
Yeah, that
they're
was
going through the
like
frustrating.
clouds.
yeah,
Oh,
Yeah,
I don't mind going through the clouds. I don't mind collecting Kinstones to unlock
but
something. I kind of
everything else in that game is a rule of three, and
yeah,
that's the one time they changed that to make it five.
yeah
And since it's the last major dungeon, it's like, come on, guys, come on, let's just get there.
I
Let's
thought
just
it
get.
was. I thought collecting the Kinstones in the wilds area before the Wind Ruins was better because just because
Yes.
they're you're like interacting with the map more. But in the clouds, you're only going through these gusts, and every path looks the same because they're all homogeneous clouds.
yeah, it gets really repetitive and very difficult to kind of be like, wait, did I already go
It's
there?
like
What did I
it's like I did
miss?
the whole cycle once, but I'm missing one. Where's the one I missed?
That's kind of what happened to me. I did the whole cycle once before I figured out what I was kind of actually after, and then I was like, oh, that's what I need. I found like the last one, and then I had to go through it all again, and then yeah, you're trying to figure out where to go through things. So it's
Totally.
also
That's a
fun
frustrating
when
one.
you do that Kinstone quest with the guy from the Sky World, and he gives you the portal to go up.
Right. That's a little bit
Um,
more helpful.
and which is yeah, I just also I wasn't able to save. I couldn't figure out what the thing with the grandpa and the ghost was. And then when you went back there after doing the Cloud Kinstone quest and getting there in the quest line itself, he was gone. So I was like, did I not save him? What happened? And like no one ever brings it up. No one ever says like, oh yeah, grandpa died or anything like that. So did
That's
you
when you
guys
check a
ever do
guide.
that?
Oh no,
Yeah,
I have no idea what you're talking about. I didn't do a lot of quests in the second half of the game because honestly well I'll get to this in a minute. But so Chris, if it wasn't the Sky Palace,
It was the other it was the Wind Ruins, and
okay,
it kind of ties into what we said before. I just think it's the most interesting with what it throws at you. With it does the best job of every dungeon of using you in miniature size. Uh, Not just to go into those machines to turn them on. In one case, it's even to turn them off, which I kind of appreciated.
right.
They at least,
yeah.
even if it's only once, we're like, it's not just the same thing. I don't know. That just felt like start to finish the most creative dungeon with the tools you had at your disposal. The last two dungeons were way too straightforward in terms of design. Even if I liked the palette and the themes they were going for there, again with the whole cloud thing, I just loved the look of it. But it wasn't an interesting dungeon. It's kind of what you had said earlier on. I don't really think there's great dungeon design in this game. I think there's great visual design, and I think there's very intriguing game theory an obtuse game theory to change up the formulas, but the dungeons themselves are kind of weak, similar to the most recent Zelda.
Yeah, they're very straightforward to be. I think it was supposed to be a very digestible
Yeah, it's
mobile
supposed to, it's more
package, so
about
people
everything
to get
else.
through
Like,
it.
yeah, do your small 5 to 10 minutes or half an hour of just tons of stuff, but it doesn't have to be the dungeon part of the
Yeah,
game.
at the risk of derailing the conversation, I mean, Breath of the Wild, I think, has an incredible Zelda overworld, but its dungeon design is sort of very empty and lacking personality for the most part, and it makes up with that lack of personality with sheer quantity, because the quests for unlocking shrines can get pretty wild, and then the shrines themselves, there's 120 of them, with maybe a quarter or so unlockable by those quests.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, like well, I'll get to the Minish Cap dungeons, but when it's my turn. But the Breath of the Wild dungeons, I agree, lack personality a little bit, and is one weakness of that game. But Greg, focusing on the Minish Cap again, do you have a favorite item and/or favorite dungeon?
My favorite dungeon, I agree, is also the Wind Ruins because for all the reasons that Chris said of just it made the best use of you as the player and your and the miniature aspect of getting through things. Although my special shout out goes to bringing back the mine carts and such in
Oh right,
Oh, in
the
the
Cave
second
of
one, yes, that's
Flames
true.
yeah, the cavern.
and
Is it cavern
With the
or Cave of
fun
Flames? I forget what it's
Cavern of
called.
Flames.
Cavern of
Cavern
Flames.
of
Yeah.
Flames.
With the fun
But just
scream sound effect that goes with it.
exactly, I just like because they had the mine carts in one of the in I think they had it in both Oracle of Ages and Seasons. I
I
think
think
they
so too.
used it in
Yes.
but it's just nice having that added animation. Again, the extra character and care that was put into this game to give it so much more life and vibrance. That just, yeah, it was just great. Just the wah. I enjoy that, although that boss was frustrating for a while.
Yep.
And then as far as the item goes, yeah, I don't know. It's tough because there's some neat new things, but I mean, the rock cape's always great for having that mobility. Although I find I got the most use out of the Pegasus boots in this one more so than I probably did in the last one, and strictly
Really?
because you could actually control yourself a lot more than you could in
Oh yeah.
Link to the Past. Whereas Link to the Past, like once you did it, you were committed. You were
Yeah.
just driving. Whereas this one, you could get some veer out of it.
Yeah, that's true, and it's maybe less control than the Pegasus Seeds in the Oracle games, but you definitely more control into the Pegasus boots. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, so I enjoyed getting a better use out of them. Yeah, because the seeds were tedious because you're swapping in and out when you only have like the two items to go through and such. Yeah, so I think that's my win for me. I just enjoy the added mobility and that it was just so much more useful.
Yeah, and I'm with you on the item swapping thing. We didn't really address this in this episode, but in Link's
No.
Awakening, the Oracle games, and in this game, it's because of the limitations of the systems that they're on. There's only really a two-button interface plus L and R, and they use that two. And you can only equip two items at a time. They're all in that. They're all either A or B, and sometimes it's tedious switching between items frequently. It feels worse in the Oracle games, I think, but maybe because
Yeah.
I think because they expect you to switch them more, and they do let you use um, the R buttons and L buttons for things like talking and throwing and climbing, which is helpful. But I'm basically done with the two-button Zelda system for this game. I'm glad I'm glad that systems are basically required to have four face buttons so that we can
You know,
at least have a Zelda game control like a Link to the Past or Link Between Worlds.
Yeah.
you actually just reminded me of something that kind of weirded me out for the first chunk of time with this game. And it had to do with the whole inventory management. Is that I'm used to the Link's Awakening slash Link to the Past thing of once you have your items, you can kind of change where those items are in your inventory in terms of when you
I don't
open up
think you
your
could do
inventory.
that in Link to the Past.
Oh, you can't? Why do I feel? Maybe it's just
In
because
the Link Between
of Link's
Worlds, you,
Awakening, you definitely can.
yeah, in Link's Away in the three Game Boy ones, you definitely can, and in Link Between Worlds, there's all kinds of crazy sorting options. But I don't.
Yeah.
In Link to the Past, I'm pretty sure they're locked in.
No, they
So,
were locked there and they would get
dear
replaced if you got
listeners,
a new item to.
Right.
ignore me because I played that game when I was a child and never since. But
Always listen to me
it
because I
really
never
annoyed
forget
me.
anything.
It really
It's
annoyed
true.
me in this game. I don't like it locked. I really don't like it locked. It's I get it. It's also dumb because a third of those items you're not going to use. And any human or any person playing that game is going to have their preferences, and they're going to want to stick to their preferences outside of the okay, I need it for this puzzle thing.
I thought it was an
And
odd
so
choice
having
having the bow and bombs
to go around
all the way in the lower
yeah,
right
that's my
because
point. Is just there's always going to be that item that if you can't tailor where it is, it's always going to take that extra 3 seconds. And it's
And then
it's a tiny thing,
my
but
question to that, yeah, that tiny, it's a valid tiny point. All the same, is it a question of, is it better to organize it for yourself for your own, just how your brain functions for your
oh
own
yeah,
muscle
that's
memory, or is it
100%
better
it
to
is.
have it
Yeah,
completely locked in, so you'll just develop the muscle memory there, and you'll just go to it anyways? Like either way, there's a muscle memory
oh
to it,
yeah,
but is it
100%.
more intuitive to you if you get to do it for yourself? Do you prefer that?
I would say that the real answer to that question would be that my first Zelda game ever was Link's Awakening. So I'm sure,
Oh.
just like how people have, usually your favorite Final Fantasy is the first one you played. At least I think that rule is pretty consistent across.
Generally, yeah.
Yeah, and
my
with
favorite
so many genres
My
and
favorite Final Fantasy
like
game
that.
is the sixth or seventh one I played.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Huh.
So
Legend of
that's
Zelda.
really what the answer to that would be.
You haven't told us what your favorites are, Mike.
Right.
Everything.
I'm a simple person. I like double jumping, so it's the Rock's Cape. Uh, and it's my favorite thing in Oracle of Seasons and in this game.
It was great.
It was a joy to remember. Oh yeah, that's in this game too, because I had truly forgotten about it when we recorded the Link's Awakening episode. When I was telling Chris about the Rockscape, I was specifically thinking of the one in Oracle of Seasons, which is a game I've played I think 3 times versus Minish Cap once, not counting the playthrough for now. But and favorite dungeon, I think it's the Temple of Droplets, just because it's not as non-linear or exploratory as the Wind Ruins, but I like that you sort of navigate one half of the dungeon, then navigate the second half, and then they sort of bring things together by opening up and breaking open the middle and freeing a boss that was frozen in the center of the dungeon for most of the for most of the games. For most of the time traversing the dungeon, it felt like a yeah, it felt like you were completing a circle, or or like really, or getting that callback stinger at the end of a stand-up set or something when you were finishing the dungeon. And so I liked that very much. But I think in general these dungeons they have personality, and I don't think they're badly designed necessarily, but I don't like them as much as my favorite dungeons in a number of other Zelda games, for a lot of the reasons Chris mentioned. They're a little formulaic and a little linear, and
Mhm.
and when they have a defining gimmick, it's not as good as the best Zelda gimmicks. It's not the floor collapsing in the Eagle's Tower, or or going or doing a dungeon twice as a child and as an adult in the Spirit Temple.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like these dungeons are fine, but they're Zelda average or Zelda
No, it doesn't
replacement
have the
level.
shock and awe effect of other games in the series.
No.
And the moments of scale, which are
Yeah.
pretty amazing sometimes in the 3D Zeldas. Like I wish they were better here, because sometimes you're shrinking literally to an inch high, then to full height, but you don't always get a sense of scale or massiveness from these dungeons, which would have been cool. But I think the gimmicks of Minish Cap work, and the items are fun. A lot of the items are just better versions of old Zelda items, because this is the best Zelda lantern,
Yeah.
the best rock
Yeah.
item, the shoot like the mole mitts are better than a shovel. There's a lot of fun interpretations and twists on Zelda formula in Minish Cap, but still I think it's a average, or maybe even slightly below average Zelda game. Like I like this game, but I don't think I loved it. I don't
Yeah, I'm
want to.
there.
I'm
It's
not a
I
comfort
definitely think
food.
it's replayable, though.
Yes, it's comfort food. It's a
yeah.
solid game. It's not bad, but it's not as you just
Yeah,
said to
you're
me
not
at
going to have
least.
your
It's
mind
not
blown,
great, exactly, but it's
except
very
by the
charming.
visuals.
Yeah, and I'm still very much on that boat. But it's very charming, very heartwarming.
The music
It
is
just
good.
makes you
I
smile.
thought the
It's
soundtrack was
very
excellent
good,
for the.
especially for a
The
GBA.
music is very nice. It
Yeah,
doesn't grate
the
on you
soundtrack
at
was
all.
excellent for this one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
I find it's very comforting.
all the trapping. Yeah, that's exactly. It's a very comforting game. There was nothing that made me unhappy about playing it. However, it's
Now
definitely
the
not amazing.
And you brought up something interesting there, Mike, a bit of like a missed opportunity almost in some of the dungeons in using the scale, in using the
Yeah,
Minish aspect.
I
Like there's no small
wanted all.
cracks you could go into.
I wanted all of the dungeons to be like the Temple of Droplets and the Deepwood Shrine, where they really play on the scale thing and have many, if not all, of the bosses be giant versions of regular Zelda enemies. I was very tickled by that concept, and part of why Temple of Droplets I think is my favorite one because you're fighting a giant Octorok.
Yeah,
But the
which was a tough fight actually.
yeah, it was a more challenging than average fight. I think maybe the only harder one was Vati at the end, but the
Yeah.
and the challenge level in Minish Cap I think is reasonable. It never felt unfair, but was at times challenging.
Oh yeah, it definitely got your blood pumping a bit now and again.
So, but in
But
general,
like
I think that there's again, it might be because I'm more goal oriented as a when I play adventure games than explorer oriented. It's part of why I mean I'll get impatient if I think a game is wasting my time with empty space. And doesn't do a good job of providing me carrots on sticks. Maybe that's just it's probably just part of my personality. I
You're
like
not a Minecraft fan.
no, I am not. But I like Zelda games with good dungeons and good moments, and I think that Minish Cap had okay moments in dungeons, but not enough of either of them for it to really be one of my favorites. And I'm not
Get good, Minish Cap.
and I mean this is I don't mean to be rude to our fans who voted this one into Retro Encounter, but
What were you thinking? No.
it's like come on guys, like A Link Between Worlds was right there, but the
Which is a great game too.
yeah, and A Link Between Worlds I think is my favorite, but
Yeah.
this is a good Zelda game. It's comfort food. It has a crazy amount of density to the world. It does really good by Zelda collectibles. I mean,
Charmin spades.
I collected 1,000-1 seashells almost instantly, but was not interested in picking up those figurines or dungeons or
That was a really
statues.
tedious thing.
Yeah.
Because it's really neat getting your little Smash Bro figurines, but
It takes 15 seconds to use this
it's
vending
so
machine.
long.
Damn it!
It's so dumb.
If they made it 1
Where
second
is
instead
this
of 10.
machine? I missed this
It's
because
in
I
the,
had 999, and I was just like, where do I even use these?
It's a hidden cave in the southwest corner of the town.
Yeah,
Yeah.
across the water, there's a bush
Yeah.
you go underneath.
I gotta do that then to see what that's like.
And there's a guy down there who you trade them in for, and you get these little figurines. And if you get all of them, it leads to, I think, the very last heart piece.
Yeah, it's a gacha. It's a gacha system, kind of like
God.
kind of like the items in a Danganronpa game.
Because
So
the more shells you trade in, the less likely you are to get a repeat figurine.
yeah.
This feels like the dog
gacha system.
shrine in the Sony SKUs of Undertale.
Oh, maybe. But it's a gacha mini game that I think does have a heart piece at the end, but it takes so long just to use the vending machine once that I got 2 trophies and I'm like, yeah, I'm done. Okay, so it looks like I'm never gonna use Secret Seashells ever again.
Right? Yeah, because like I love I'm someone who enjoys a bit of the lore, and it's nice to kind of explore a bit on the world. So when you get the figurines, it's very cool getting those little descriptions of these people, monsters. I like
figurines
that,
themselves
but just,
are great,
it's
but
so tedious to go through that it was not worth the price of admission.
Yeah, so I mean, this might have among like higher than average amount of Zelda collectibles and items, which is remarkable in that the world is smaller than average. But that's not my favorite part of. Yeah, it's not my favorite parts of Zelda are cool dungeons, cool boss fights, cool weapons, and I don't think Minish Cap delivered at the highest level of my favorite things about Zelda. So I've only played 10 Zelda games to completion, but I think Majora's Mask, excuse me. I think Minish Cap ranks like 9th or 10th.
Different people with piece of headgear. The thing I wanted to bring up just quickly before we wrap it up is, I'm assuming you've both played Ocarina of Time before you played Minish Cap?
No.
Yes,
Really? Okay.
for me.
I didn't. I played Minish Cap around 04, 05. I played Minish Cap in 05, I'm pretty sure, and I didn't play Ocarina of Time until I had a GameCube version in 2010 or 2011.
Oh, well then this may only resonate with Chris, but when you got to the graveyard and you got to that hut, were you just like, Gappy's going to be in there?
That's amazing. Yeah.
Like,
And
I was like, I'm going to open this door, he's going to be there.
Lon Lon Ranch, yeah. And when it was him, I was like, this is the best. That's why it's comfort food. There's just so
It was
many
so
little
satisfying.
touchstones of game. I mean, Ocarina of Time was such a happiness game for me. So yeah,
Yeah.
100%, man. You nailed it. Yes.
I never owned an N64, and I didn't play any 3D Zeldas until I decided to, stop being stubborn about it, and I played 3 of them in a row in the 2011-2012 range. So, and
Kept
and,
you
and
busy.
and I played Ocarina of Time on a GameCube disc.
Hey,
Oh
look, kind
dear.
of similar for me in terms of how I've approached the whole Zelda series.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, totally get that.
But anyway, I mentioned that on
Yeah.
a different Zelda episode this month, which I guess hasn't been published yet because we're recording several episodes close together.
Will by the time you've heard this.
Right.
But that episode is technically in the past, but not. It's not about A Link to the Past. All right,
Oh my
so
gosh, are we gonna time travel jump through all of our different podcasts via swords and
How
temples
did
and
I
such?
get here? You should
oh
just
yeah,
splice random
oh yeah.
random lines of
I'm,
confusion and fear.
I may have accidentally made references to future episodes in this podcast, for all I know.
Right.
Speaking of time travel, I did the Wind Ruins twice because I'm an idiot.
What?
I was playing it on the virtual console and I made the restore point, but
Oh
instead of
no.
creating a new one, I
Mm.
accidentally loaded an old one and thus
Oh,
lost about an hour and a
yep.
half, 2 hours of progress. It was rough. Cautionary
I,
tale,
I was
kids.
I was playing this on a physical GBA, so I didn't have that issue. But I was playing our game for next month on the Super Nintendo Classic, and I accidentally lost about an hour and a half or 2 hours of progress
Oh,
because
dear Mike.
because I pressed A instead of Y when I was loading in the new save state or restore points, whatever they called them. But anyway,
I just like to imagine you were crying out, "Why?
No, I
Why?
was upset.
Why weren't you A?"
I turned off the machine and switched to a book. I was done with video games for a while after that. And that was less than a week ago, so it's fresh in my memory. But anyway, let's stop living in the present and talk about the future a little bit. Chris and Greg, thank you so much for joining me on this episode, both of you, and thank you, listeners.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh,
Yeah,
anytime.
it's a blast.
Yeah, I was just excited to come in at this point in RPG fans' history with the whole Legend of Zelda stuff happening. And I was like, I can't contribute to one of my favorite game series. So when you asked me to do this, I was like, yes, I want to be a part of it. I want to contribute to something Legend of Zelda. So thank you.
Yeah.
Right, I should mention at the time of recording this, Greg is the newest recruit to RPG fan staff. Greg, you
Yes,
are
sir.
probably going to be a regular co-host on Random Encounter alongside Derek Heemsbergen and
And Caitlin. Yeah.
oh, and Caitlin as well, right? And this is your first retro encounter episode, so you got in here just the nick of time before Zelda month was over. Good for you.
Yeah, I was really, really happy that it came at this point because I was trying to offer, but all the articles and stuff have been done for the features as everyone has now been reading through. So I was just like, no. So it was, yeah, thank you
Right now, I will get to
for
those
this
articles.
opportunity.
I will get into those articles in just a moment. But first, listeners, thank you for listening to us for this entire episode. And thank you for voting for the Minish Cap in that poll that we conducted in February. But looking to the future a little bit, next week is the first Thursday in May. We're going to have a episode that's a little more negative than usual. I don't want to spoil everything about it, but I mean, today we've been very celebratory, as we often are in Retro Encounter. But next week we're going to talk about things about video games we don't like as much. The episode's already in the can, and it was a lot of fun to record. And following that episode, we are doing 2 episodes on Super Mario RPG: Legend of the Seven Stars. So look forward to those in May. 2 people on those podcasts have not played the game before, so I was a little bit appalled that we have such young babes on the podcast that haven't played one of my favorite Super Nintendo games, but it was really fun getting a fresh perspective from them alongside me and the other panelists who are grizzled veterans in our late 20s, early 30s. And following the first of those Mario RPG episodes, we are doing a sequel episode to something we did in 2016. So please look forward to that one as it comes as well. And also, I mentioned Greg and Derek on Random Encounter. That's the other podcast on RPG Fan. Derek took over the podcast from Rob Simon recently, and he's going to try to adhere to a 2-a-month schedule, which he's been doing.
He is, yep.
Which he's been doing very successfully so far. He's done an excellent job on the early episodes. I'm on one of them for April, but
That's why it's good. Now I understand.
that might be far in the past now. No. The Sollosi episodes
Quality,
are the ones you
Mike.
want to skip. Because it's going to be me stammering about Monster Hunter for about 20 of my 25 minutes.
That's so good. I love it so much.
I really do. But listeners, enough about the future. Let's talk about well, I guess also the future. If you want to talk to us sometime in the future, the best way to do so is to email us at retro@rpgfan.com. Go to rpgfan.com and check out all of the cool content on the site. There are forums, there are features, there are reviews, there are music reviews with tracks in the sidebar. We have pages on Instagram, Facebook, and
There's Discord now.
and Discord and Twitch. So if you check the front page of RPG Fan, you can find the schedules and links to all of those wonderful things. In the month of April, we released a 4-part series called Hylian Highlights, which I might have accidentally called Hyrule Highlights a week ago or 2 weeks ago, and I apologize for that. It turns out there's a lot of weird Zelda alliteration you can do. And it's a sort of a disorganized list of a bunch of our favorite Zelda items, moments, songs, dungeons, settings, characters, everything. It was mostly designed by Stephanie Sabidlo, our social media manager, who loves Zelda about as much as anyone on the website, and it was a lot of fun putting that feature together. So please check that out. If it's not on the front page anymore, because maybe you're listening to this episode in 2020 for all I know, if you go to rpgfan.com, go to features and look for
That's the address. Yep.
go to features and then check around April 2018. That's where you find that Zelda mini feature. So what else is there to talk about? Review us on iTunes.
Don't
Google
confuse
Play,
it with
please.
Hylian hair highlights.
Hylian hair highlights. That's true. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
The
Make it
hair
all
in
blonde.
Zelda. I don't know. There's not a ton of interesting Zelda hair. Is there? Who has the best Zelda hair?
If you just want to get that luscious blonde look or luscious pink look, if you're looking at Link to the Past, just look no further than Hylian hair highlights.
Who has the best hair in Legend of Zelda? Now, I think we should do an entire episode about this.
Oh my god.
Oh my gosh, yes.
In Ocarina of Time, I guess, because it's a tiny bit poking out underneath the hood,
I don't
so
know.
it looks like what's
Beatles
actually going on
bowl cut?
under there.
I like a nice
Beetle.
Bowl cut, I like it.
I like a nice a nice Goron shock of hair and
Thank
beard.
you.
That's not bad.
If for the ones that have it. At any rate, I digress with dumb jokes. I apologize. You were telling them to shout out to us. Sorry to derail you, Mike.
Yeah, no, it's all good. Please review us on iTunes or Google Play or however you're listening to us. We enjoy and appreciate all feedback. And now, before we shut the door on this completely, Chris, how can listeners reach you?
You can reach me on Twitter at Chris Gebauer, or find me through my website, christophergebauer.com. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Or on the boards as Chris Gebauer.
Do we use the boards
me.
anymore?
All right, then if you are the one person who wants to somehow use the boards, that's who I am.
Very good. Greg, how can listeners reach out to you?
I'm very similar as an actor as Chris is too. Put my name out there. If you search Greg Delmage, you'll pretty much find me anywhere. I'm at Greg Delmage on Twitter, on Instagram, on IMDb, all that fun stuff. I'm not as fancy as Chris. I don't have my own personal website yet, but you know, all in due time.
I just think it's because I'm older, not because there's better. Very different.
And then I'm Peregrine on the boards if you happen to go there.
Yeah, this is an interesting balance of panelists we have today. There's actor, and sewer plan worker.
Hey, someone who actually
little bit of a
does
jump.
real work that affects people, and two people who are trying very hard to stay as children for their entire lives.
And let's be honest, if you just had just two actors on this podcast would have stopped being about Minish Cap a long time ago without someone with your constructive, logical mind keeping us on track.
Probably would have got lost
boy.
in Zelda impressions at some point. It would have been fun. Another day, another time.
Sure.
You're like, no,
All right.
not on my watch. All right.
Listeners, if you want to reach me, the easiest way to do so is via Twitter. I am at The Real Monsoon most of the time, and at Evoker for Dogs when I get weird and talk about Japanese superheroes. I am Monsoon on the forums and Monsoon Mike on Discord. I guess that's about all. Thank you, good night, and good luck.